We're here today with Sayer G. Sayer, I'm so glad to be talking with you. He's my co-host for the 5G Crisis Summit, and he's written an amazing new book here. Sayer, you just sent me a copy of this. This doesn't even come out for a couple months. At the end of May, or end of March rather, it releases. And I've gotten into this book, and it's amazing. You know what you're bringing forward in terms of the quantum sciences, in terms of cutting edge research, in terms of radiation protection and things that could actually help at a core level protect us from radiation and actually change our lives, basically, right? I call this a powerful disruptive technology. So I'm so excited for your book, and as a friend and a brother, I'm so proud of you for bringing your 20 years of research into this book. And so tell us about it. I mean, it took 3 years to write this and to compile this into one book, right?
Thank you, Josh. Yeah, it was really a labor of love, and labor is the right word because there's a point before you give birth that's called the transition.
Yeah.
I know this because I've had 2 children through my ex-wife, of course, and I also was the nutrition educator for a birth center in Naples. So the transitions when you get really wild and like angry, and it's right before you give birth, and it was a difficult process to put this all onto paper because it represented my entire life struggle with really starting off with severe bronchial asthma, multiple surgeries throughout my early childhood and early adulthood, and really just a horrific experience with allopathic medicine. And so it was a dire life and death necessity for me to learn what is in this book so I could really take back control of my health destiny. And also, the beautiful thing was, it wasn't just that there was already an existing body of folkloric and natural medical support for the premise, which is you can heal yourself of virtually any condition using food and lifestyle and mindset practices. But it was that the new biology, which I think you could say around the turn of the 21st century, around 2000, research on certain topics started to scale, be it the microbiome, microRNAs, which are really master regulators of gene expression, topics like food as information, topics like transduction of vacuum energy or 0-point energy in biological systems. This is like next level stuff that helped me to understand how a body, my body specifically, but any body, in today's extremely unnatural environment, non-native EMF, of course, and synthetic chemicals and GMO, how we can not only survive, but somehow still thrive, given what is essentially like a full-blown assault against our health. And it's because of the profound resilience that biological systems have and exhibit, and some of the most amazing things that have ever been discovered related to germline or stem cells within living systems being technically immortal and also capable of, again, transducing what is practically infinite amount of energy from the quantum vacuum and transducing it into material expression.
Yeah.
It sounds like unicorns and magic, but this is actually really validated now by basic science. So I wanted to help get that information out in a day and age where we're all suffering and we're, sinking in the mire. It's a scary thing. I mean, the 5G rollout alone is enough to want to go in some cabin out there in the wild and never see a human again. I'm here to hopefully contribute to an awareness that we are radically resilient and there are things we can do to mitigate the harms that are imposing upon us.
Definitely. Well said. Well, one of the things I love most about you is like, you're an incredible and amazing researcher, but you're also a leading edge activist. Like you're advocating on the front lines for people's health and their rights and informed consent. And you do so in such a powerful way. So we're going to get into some of these gems here. And I would just like to give our audience an overview, if we can, of like some of the things really in this book that you expound upon, and your masterclass coming up. And your masterclass is at the end of March, is that right?
End of February is the masterclass, and so basically the idea is the book took 3 years to write, and it was a whole lifetime of, self-exploration and research to try to come to a real succinct understanding, to deliver something that would have digestible meaning, right, to the public. I mean, I think there is someone who once said that anyone who claims to understand quantum mechanics doesn't. Like, so anyone who presumes to be able to talk on the subject, may have some issues, and I'm apparently one of them, because ultimately the topics are very difficult to translate without doing them a disservice. And so I had to go through some severe, dark nights of the soul to come up with some of the information, because I'm taking a bit of a risk here, but I also feel like not speaking on it, not trying to translate is going to do a greater disservice at this point. So the masterclass was an attempt to take a lot of the information, make it practically useful in a way that you just can't do in a book. And it's a free event, and that's what I love about the internet, is that we can give this information out for free, basically, without there being any. With the 5G summit, as you and I know, it costs hundreds of thousands of dollars to produce a free event, and we could have both been in debt, but it just turned out that somehow the universe supported it. So the idea is let's just give it out to the public for free and give them the empowerment. And the master classes, I think, is a great way to do that.
Yeah, excellent. So, and you're expecting a 150,000, 200,000?
Yeah, there's a good number have already signed up, and it's definitely a topic. I think it's like 5G. It's like in the zeitgeist. People need to feel and know that there's hope, and there's something that they can do in their lives that's practical, that will empower them. And that's all I've ever tried to do with Greenman Info. But now I feel like I've come to a point where I can really deliver this with absolute confidence, and that's the key.
Yeah, and I really like this direction, because I mean, I'm really experiencing, Sarah, to change our world, we really need to. It's like an inside job. It's from the inside out. It's like we're turning inside out, outside in, really walking through that process of maybe being like disillusioned with what's going on in our world, and really being pulled into connecting with the truth, the power within, with like our identity, unmasking the illusions, right? Unmasking the structures that are both out there and in here, and really connecting and getting empowered within. And so your work here really just is like new paradigm. It really aligns with that. It just sets the stage for people to really change, not only their own lives, their families, but and then the world. And so
thank you. I just want to give some credit to others out there who've been blazing the trail, like Jeffrey Bland, founder of the Institute for Functional Medicine, IFM. And then you have people like Bruce Lipton, biology of the belief, and how he helped people understand epigenetics on a whole nother level, which is also, there's the quote, mind-body way to modulate gene expression. It's not just nutrients, nutrigenomic layer of certain compounds turn on or off genes. And I think that we're ready now for people to fully understand that when we're talking about the new biology and the effects that, for example, eating something as beautiful as this, it doesn't come from my book, Romanesco, it's got sulforain. Sulforain is probably one of the most powerful protective agents ever identified. You go to Greenman Info, you look it up, and Stephanie Seneff, who's a good colleague of mine, focuses so much on sulfur and sulfuration, transsulfuration. Because what's happening is that we have sulfur deficiency. It's in the soil, actually, but also in our foods. And without that pathway, you can't detoxify fat-soluble toxicants, for example, the ones that love to accumulate in our tissue. That's just one example. So you've got that incredible ingredient in an ancestral food like this, but the reality, it's the information. And what I mean by that is you look at this, there's a Fibonacci series, it's fractal, there's self-similar patterns occurring at the different scales. It's really just beautiful. You see it. Food is information. But there's actually a specific example that, speaks more to what the conventional, genetic model says, which is nucleic acids run the show. Well, microRNAs, it's a type of nucleic acid, are found within this, in these little particles called exosomes, that when you consume it, it goes into your blood and starts to modulate the expression of your protein coding genes, making it basically a master regulator. So what that means is your body's control of its own genetic infrastructure was outsourced to certain foods. And so if we don't have these foods in our diet, the entire integrity of our system biologically falls apart. And that's why you can't say cancer is a deficiency of radiation or chemotherapy, but you can say it's a deficiency of vegetables and fruits. This is software for the hardware of our body.
Yeah.
And that's where people start to get it. It's almost like text messages, sending good information or healing signals versus really bad text messages that are saying, a bomb's going to land here in North America in 30 minutes, go run for cover. Imagine what that does to your system. Well, the information is either positive or negative. If it's GMO and it's been all tinkered with, it's negative. If it's ancient, God created it, nature created it, it's positive. And it's that simple. And that's just the food layer, but there's many other layers, as you know.
Yeah. So eat your fractal broccoli, everyone. So we got 6 gems here earmarked. We're just going to give everyone a taste of this. The first is, so not only can melanin convert light into heat, but new research raises the possibility that it can also transform other forms of radiation into metabolically useful forms of energy. So back in the day, like 15, 20 years ago, I remember seeing an interview with a conscious media network in which they were interviewing someone from Russia who had firsthand evidence of what happened in Chernobyl.
Right.
And he said that the majority of biological life was negatively affected, but there were some people that they were like transformed in a positive way, that they were like had an accelerated development in almost an inexplicable way in that region, that incident happened with the nuclear radiation. Now, this is something that it boggles, traditional science. Like, how is that even possible? But what you talk about here about melanin, first of all, what is melanin? And talk about some of this science that could be very empowering.
Yeah, so melanin is found throughout the body, deep within our tissues, as well as on the surface of the skin, obviously. Was first believed to be primarily as a sort of almost like nature's sunscreen, but the new research now shows it actually has more like a solar panel like functionality, and it's able to absorb the entire electromagnetic spectrum, right? From X-rays, like all the way to radio waves. And so what they found in Chernobyl, for example, is the walls of the still steaming reactor had this highly melanized fungi that was covering it. And that was the first real indication that there are certain organisms, microorganisms, that are literally eating the radiation. Since then, we've found certain bacteria that consume, uranium and consume other radioisotopes that are considered absolutely deadly. And in the book, I cover this, is that there is evidence that certain bacteria can biologically transmute through what is essentially cold fusion or fission, certain elements into less harmful elements. So there's really a profound application, even radiobiologically, for remediation purposes of this research when it comes to radiation fallout. So in other words, melanin is something we can also get from certain foods. Like that's why chaga has one of these incredible folkloric histories as a therapeutic agent. It does a number of things. I mean, it has immunomodulatory properties. It's been used for cancer, but one of the things the biomelanin appears to be able to do is help organisms take ambient non-native EMF and transform it into what is essentially harmless or maybe even slightly beneficial metabolic activity. So that does bode well because the radiation problem, if it's low dose radioisotopes in our food chain, or if it's EMF coming through 5G, it's only getting worse. So there are ways that we can hopefully harness nature's ingenious mechanism, because if you think about it, radiation has always been a part of any geological system in any planet. So life had to navigate around that and utilize these sources of energy. And so we're not an exception. That's one of the things I've come to understand is our body can access energy from the sun directly. And we are therefore photoheterotrophic, or in between heterotrophs, right? That have to consume other things, and autotrophs like plants that just take sunlight. We're actually right in the middle.
So we can kind of navigate. I mean, depending on our choices, our diet, our lifestyle, and our, perhaps intention, we can navigate which side of that, like what modality. Is that what the science is saying?
Well, yeah, we can toggle, between
Yeah.
being plant-like or animal-like in that respect, because for the longest time, zoologically, we were classified as incapable of taking sunlight energy. But now we know through chlorophyll, melanin, and structured water that we can take the electromagnetic wavelengths that come from the sun and transform them directly into metabolic activity. It can even be used to cause charge separation of water. In photosynthesis, you have photolysis, breaking apart of water for energy and for molecular oxygen and hydrogen. Well, that can be induced through melanin as well. So you have a completely different channel for energy production and storage, thanks to the new biology.
So, okay, so this, I just want to highlight this because this is really significant. The hypothesis based on published science is that if you're high in melanin, you have a better ability to really transmute forms of radiation. And that would potentially and perhaps even probably include wireless radiation, from EMF, from 5G, from different forms of radiation. So it's like a working hypothesis, but it's quite strongly backed in science, right? And I just want to read this quickly. In your book, you quote a study published in Biochemistry, which says diets rich in melanin may be beneficial to overcome radiation toxicity in humans. So what foods are rich in melanin if we're going to explore this, very compelling pathway for ourselves?
Yeah, biomelanin's interesting. I mean, basically, you could look at anything from, black beans, to, basic dark mushrooms. There's a wide spectrum of what you might call pigments from plants that are like melanin in their action. So, obviously endogenously produced melanin is ideal. You see certain conditions like Parkinson's disease where the substantia nigra is demelanized. And so when you have lower melanin in key regions of the brain, that affects oxygen levels, energy production in those regions. Now we're starting to understand melanin's role is not just to make our different tissues look prettier or different. It has a vital, significant role to play.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, you get into circadian rhythms, and then you talk about grounding and earthing. Um, Studies that say that grounding reduces the voltage induced on the body by a factor of 70 upon exposure to alternating current electric potential. So grounding, getting in nature. So what's your version? I know there's proponents that say, well, you just need to be connected to this silver threaded sheet and you can plug it into the grounding cord in your wall. But and there's others that say, no, only go to forest, go to the oceans. What's your perspective on grounding?
Well, definitely anything one can do to mitigate the non-native EMF and dirty electricity, obviously it's going to help. And but I do think that the primary mandate is bare feet on the ground, right, or on something conductive. As I understand it, even concrete can conduct. But I would advocate things like grass and sand. I go out of my way in my fitness practice to make sure that I'm exposing my feet. I mean, you can't even reduce it to the grounding, although extremely beneficial, but just all that it does for your nervous system, and so many things that we can do that are just so simple that would dramatically alter our health destiny.
Yeah, it is amazing how sometimes the most simple things can really transform our life path. Reactive oxygen species and how grounding just deals with those so effectively. I know
Yeah.
in our summit, Dr. Paul Haru talked about ROS as it relates to EMF and wireless, and so that's powerful.
Yes.
Do you want to talk briefly about? I know we don't have a lot of time. You're extremely busy. You have another engagement coming up. Do you want to talk about the Casimir effect and why this is significant?
Well, it's one of
Or
the more
that's a
interesting.
bigger conversation, right? But
Yeah, I mean, it's really a powerful example in physics of where so-called vacuum energy or zero-point energy is observed to be transducible, right, into physical three-dimensional systems. So that specific experiment has very closely pressed together plates, steel plates, that basically show that there is this ground level of energy in the quantum vacuum available at any point in space and time that will contribute to a actual mechanical action, right? That it does work. And so why is this interesting? Well, because those flat plates are similar to the feet of geckos who love to walk up walls and hang from our ceilings. It's always been this magic trick. How are they doing that, right?
Mhm.
It turns out that they have a Casimir-like plate surface on those feet, and they're harnessing in part the vacuum energy, and that they're using that as a way to not basically work against gravity. That's really what's happening. So there are other amazing examples of where zero-point energy is being utilized, and much more profound are things like um, the thumb splitting shrimp, the ones that are known to basically use cavitation. It's a exotic water bubble that forms when they strike with their claw, and what happens is that it basically creates an implosion event that harnesses quantum vacuum energy, which produces heat that is close to what you find on the surface of the sun.
The temperature inside the bubble reaches over 4,000 degrees, and as it collapses, this massive energy is released like a superheated shockwave.
And so this is a shrimp, literally, that's utilizing quantum vacuum energy in a way that is extremely measurable. And in sonoluminescence, it's the same thing. You can use an acoustical wave or laser to induce water cavitation, which then in water, like in a jar, they sometimes call it a star in a jar, will
Mhm.
produce light and heat that is similar to what you would find in a sort of like a stellar event. And so this is next level, and yet it happens, and biological systems seem to be able to induce it. So what does that mean for us? Well, my assumption is that we have access to quantum vacuum energy. It's just not something that is easy to understand through conventional biology and science, but we're starting to see evidence of that, and the book goes into greater detail on that topic.
it's incredible how you're like pushing the envelope of, you know, comprehension and understanding of this new paradigm. You know, and kind of you're taking things that are extremely difficult to explain, and when we always hear of like new technologies coming out that they have found something, but it's extremely difficult to replicate still. But you're clarifying it, so I love that. Your ability with
Well,
language is outstanding. You talk about Douglas Wallace, PhD. Each mitochondrion stores energy with a huge electrical field potential that defies our heretofore understanding in science. Can you talk about that and the significance there, of the power, the potential
yeah.
energy within each mitochondria?
Well, Wallace's work, he's sort of the preeminent scientist when it comes to mitochondria, has shown that we have a total of about a lightning bolt worth of energy if you total up all the cells and what they contribute. But what's even more powerful is each mitochondrion has an electric field strength potential of 30 million volts per meter in the inner mitochondrial membrane, which if you consider that there's maybe 4,000 mitochondria per neuron, and you do the math on the billions of cells throughout the body, this is why Nassim Haramein talks about, basically the mass of the entire universe somehow within a proton, meaning like there's a near infinite amount of energy in the quantum vacuum. And that when you really start to understand the miracle of the energy that's being produced in a single mitochondrion, which by the way, in the book I go into this,
Mhm.
may perform a feat that is similar to a cyclotron, that literally it is a particle accelerator that takes energy from the quantum vacuum and converts it through the inversion of Einstein's equals mc squared, right? It basically turns light into matter within the mitochondrion. That is actually something that seems to help explain what you observe in certain biological systems. So we're at the frontier of a whole new vision of what the body is and what it can do. And it's very difficult to try to articulate these concepts because some of them you can't even really visualize adequately. But I will tell you that some conclusion is that the body is a veritable miracle in performing just the most immense feats possible. And it's happening every moment. And this might help explain why, given the many deadly vectors that we're exposed to, dietary, electromagnetic, chemical, why we're still waking up every day, you and me, Josh, still feeling somewhat functional and whole. It's a miracle, but it's because of not the new biology. It's always been our biology. It's just that it was always cast in a very debilitating and it's really a form of control, right? For people to think that their bodies break down over time because of some vague inherited gene that their ancestors passed down versus the reality, which is we are actually in control to a large degree of our health destiny based on what we're eating and what we're putting our mind into.
That's powerful, man. It's like the veil between science and spirit is just pretty much non-existent now for those who are willing to, go there, right? It just really quickly, the last point I want to give our audience a peek into is this exclusion zone or easy water, like easy water. What is that? Is that something that's in us? Is it something that's in a bottle that we can buy in a store somewhere? Like, why is it significant?
That's so good. Yeah. I mean, so Jerry Pollack, who I met and went to his laboratory out in Washington, he has come to an understanding of water that is just so profound, which is that in biological systems, it's structured in a very specific way. It's actually like a hexagonal crystal, and it's in the form of H3O2. So it is literally a new form of water. And it's actually, it's part of our biological system. Like if you were to go and look at the lining of any biomolecule, like what's on the surface, it's got what's called a hydration shell. And right there off the surface of this water-loving surface is a type of water that is negatively charged, alongside of which is a positive charge. And it's like a molecular battery. It stores energy, it stores information. And this is actually what our body is comprised of. I mean, we know we're 99% water molecules by number. We also know that EMF heats water selectively, which is why, the 2.4 gigahertz Bluetooth standard is the same as, microwave ovens. And we know that the millimeter wave is even worse, which is why the meteorologists are up in arms, because it's going to affect their ability to predict weather patterns.
And even astronomers now with 5G, right? And all these satellites, like there's so many reasons why it's just an insane thing, but we have to engage it. We have to, be willing to play a role in redirecting that narrative, right?
Exactly. But so once we understand that water is structured, it's fragile too. I mean, it can get destructured very easily. I mean, when I went to his lab, one of the things they were doing was looking at the effects of aspirin and glyphosate on the EZ zone. And they found that it would degrade it, whereas other things will increase it, especially things that are coming from nature that are charged with biological energy. Drink some watermelon and see what that does to your easy water, or take water that's out in a glass container and put it in the sunlight. It will actually structure it. So this is really cutting edge science now. It's not some kind of like, woo-woo thing.
So H3O2, it's this easy water that science is indicating that has unique, powerful properties. And so we can increase it within our body by, you said, putting water in sunlight. And also you mentioned the book, if you live close to like underground streams or like natural spring water.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And consider if you're getting water from your tap water, right? That's called bulk water. It's not structured properly and has all these other chemicals and disinfectant byproducts. But it would take a lot of biological energy to structure it in a way that's going to work with your biomachinery. So that's another thing to consider is if you call it chi or life energy, is it's going to take chi away from you if you have dead water. Could even be RO water that's purified but isn't structured. That's why you might put in a little bit of sea salt. You might expose it to water, a little lemon juice. Things like that will restructure the water, at least to the point where your body is not going to feel like it's being exposed to something harmful.
Awesome. Sayarji, thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for this book. It's like totally in service to humanity. And what I like about you is you're an expert on another thing that I like about you. I keep like praising you. Like I'm just in your fan club here. I mean, you're my partner in the summit.
My head getting larger. Watch out. Won't fit in the screen. No.
But you get into the real science, you know, and at the same time you talk about the whole front end of the book is just exposing these matrix control system aspects like mainstream, or you know, like the science, how it's been skewed by for-profit industry interests that are using it to control and to harm. You're totally not afraid to, you're not pulling any punches at all. So, I mean, and you talk about scientism and the deadly aspect of scientism in our culture today. So,
like a religion, yeah, for sure.
yeah. So your work is in this book powerfully. It's in the Masterclass. And the Masterclass is at the end of February, right? People can sign up for free, join a huge community there of everyone, you know, coming into this material and actually embodying it. And towards the last part of the book, I have taken a close look at this, and I'm gonna do this. It's you know, the process by which you embody the regeneration. So how you access the benefit of all of these realizations in biophysics and quantum physics and so forth. And so you have a whole program in here. It's really great. Thank you so much for your work in the world and for just having this conversation with us today, brother. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Josh. It's an honor. I love you and your work, and I think that hopefully a lot of people will benefit from this information.
Hi, my name is Sayarji, founder of greenmedinfo.com and author of the upcoming book, Regenerate. I put together a special masterclass for you called Regenerate Yourself, which will involve cutting-edge research that will open your eyes to ways that you can take full control of your health destiny and experience renewed vitality, energy, and joy. We've put together an incredible array of interviews, menus, fitness programs. All you have to do is sign up below, put your name and email in, and we'll save your spot, and we'll deliver you some free bonus content that you can start using today, and I know that you'll love.